Hi everybody, it's Michael again. I just wanted to jump in here really quickly and do a quick video for you about this week's blog post. I'm over here on my website, and this week I have a blog post called Solving Irregular Layouts with Practical Tips and Creative Solutions. This one is going to be about sloped ceilings, alcoves, odd-shaped rooms, furniture that's going to fit into odd-shaped rooms, and all the different things that you want to think about when it comes to designing a small, tricky, or awkward space. And if you're new here, that is basically what I talk about here on my channel, is small, tricky, and awkward spaces. If you're a returning guest, thank you so much for joining me again. At the end of the video, I'm going to talk a little bit about my video from last week, which was about my pantry update. So a couple weeks ago, I did a pantry update where I put some storage on the back of my pantry door, and I talked about my plans for doing a total renovation on my small little walk-in pantry off my kitchen. And this week we're going to show you a little bit about what the progress is. It's not quite done. It's going to take me a little bit longer to do, but I kind of told you about that last week, so no surprises there. But this week I wanted to jump into this video pertaining to my latest blog post, which again is about creative solutions for irregular layouts in awkward shaped rooms. So today we're going to be talking about that. And if you go over onto my website, just a quick little plug here for my website, michaelhelwiginteriors.com, and read the blog. I do a blog a week, and I also do a guest blog for each week as well. Usually on Mondays, I have guest blogs up, and that can be about anything that a guest blogger wants to talk about on my website within reason. I don't allow things that are kind of shady or gross. But most of my content is going to be pertaining to the small, tricky, and awkward spaces, or interior design at least. So if you are a blogger and you want to contribute to a guest post on my site, please get a hold of me over at michaelhelwig.com. You can go over to my contact page and give me a pitch, and I'd be happy to read about what you would like to do for a guest post for me. But getting back to today's post, so we're going to jump into that here. I have a little cover image that shows a client's house that I did a couple years ago. This is actually an Airbnb up in Canada, which is a great little place in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. So this particular room has a vaulted ceiling. So we have a vault on this side, and we have a shorter ceiling on this side. So it's kind of hard to see in this kind of bird's eye view perspective, but I'll get into that in a little while here to kind of show you about what this particular room is challenged with. So the first thing you want to do when you are going to be designing a space, and this pertains to any space at all, not just tricky or awkward spaces, but especially for tricky and awkward spaces, you want to assess your space. So what you want to do first is to draw a sketch of the room. So this is basically that first sketch that I showed you, that bird's eye viewpoint here. This is what the room sketch would look like in a two-dimensional format. So what you want to do is you want to stand in the middle of the room, and a lot of times I like to tell people to maybe draw an L. So basically it's that top corner wherever you're facing in the room. So stand in the middle of the room and face the wall in front of you, look over into the corner and draw that first corner. That's your L. So you want to do that first. And then as you spin yourself around and you're facing this wall now, you're facing the wall over here, you're going to draw that wall. This particular room has one long wall that goes all the way down. Then you're going to scoot your body, and face the opposite direction again, and you're going to draw the room going in this direction. Now, when you're looking at this direction toward me, toward the bottom of the room, there's a window here, a big long window. This is the only light space in this shared space over here. So you want to kind of incorporate that too. And then there's a little bit of an alcove here. It juts over into this entry space area where the front door is. And then when they go around this way, you're going to turn your body then that way to face that final wall on this side over here. And you're going to draw that space, go all the way up. And then you're going to go back again to facing that first original wall and join that last corner, that first corner that you drew. So basically, you're going to have a room that's either a rectangle or a square, or it has like a bunch of different angles. But whatever you're going to do, you're going to turn your body toward those spaces so that you're looking at that angled wall or whatever alcove you have going on in front of you, and you're drawing that as you're standing in the middle of the room. And it just helps you be able to kind of turn your body. So you're just going to take a piece of paper, you're just going to take a notepad or a piece of copy paper, stick it on a clipboard, and you're just going to draw out your room. It doesn't have to be perfect. This is obviously a generated, computer generated sketch. My sketches in my own hand are not anywhere near as neat as this, and you don't have to be neat, so you don't have to worry about that. But that is the one way to really kind of get your room down on paper, sort of giving yourself a bird's eye view of the room so that you can kind of see where all of your little tricky spots are. Then you go back and you add in all of your attributes in the room. So if there's a fireplace, if there's a built-in shelf, if there's a closet, like this area has a closet over here, you go back in and you add in that closet space. You add in the doors here. That creates a new wall inside of this interior wall over here, and then it goes over into this space, which is actually the kitchen. We'll get to that in a second. So this space then has this big closet right when you're walking into the space. That's where that is here. And then it has this large wall over here on this side. Now, it helps to then write out what all of your bits and bobs are in the room too. So if you have like a taller ceiling, if you have a fireplace, if you have all of those things, you want to label all of that. And that really helps you when you're going to keep this sketch probably in your car, or you're going to keep it on your phone. You're going to keep this sketch so that when you're out buying furniture or buying decor for your room, you have something to refer back to. So you're going to then label all of those areas on your sketch. So this room here has a big window down at the bottom part of this room here. The ceiling slopes up onto this side over here, which is 11 feet, and it slopes down to 7 feet on the kitchen window side over here. So this whole area has a vaulted ceiling. It kind of goes up in this direction and off down into this direction over here on the shorter side. So then you're going to, also kind of notate your alcove over here, your entry door as you're walking in, the closet space. You're going to also want to, label the different functions of the room. So you have a living room down here on this side, you have a dining room over here on this side, and you have a kitchen over here on this side. Okay, so you have all of your labeling done. The next thing you want to do is determine your traffic flow. So because this is a shared space, you're going to have a dining room space, you're going to have a living room space. So as you're walking into this room here, you're walking through the front door. Again, you have your foyer area here. You don't really want to put a lot of heavy furniture over here. So maybe a small bench over here, maybe a small entry cabinet over here in this little alcove space. You don't want to clutter up the space with too much furniture because you want it to be functional, right? You want to be able to get into these closet doors. You want to have access to the front door so you're not hitting anything behind it that's going to be too deep off the wall. So you want to keep that in mind. You're walking into the space this way. Then you want to walk through the space this way. There's a doorway that goes to the bedrooms and the bathrooms back here. And of course, you have your kitchen, which is going to have a probably U-shaped kitchen with cabinetry and appliances that are going to go around the entire room like this. So you want to be mindful of that too. And the reason why you want to be mindful of that is you want to keep these spaces that you're walking through open. So really you have a rectangular space over here to put your living room furniture, and you have another smaller rectangular space over here to put your dining room furniture. Now, of course, you don't know what it's going to be yet. At this point, you're just sort of in your planning phases. You're just sort of mapping out the room, and you're making it accessible so that you can walk through it and keep everything clear. Now, you can't have a focal point down here because this is a big, large window, so you really can't have like maybe a television cabinet in front of it. You want to keep this space open. That means that your long wall here, which in this living room space, the long wall is going to be this wall that joins the dining room space here. And this would be the space that you would put probably your seating, your upholstered furniture, which means that this is the focal point wall over here across from it. So this closet wall here is going to serve as the space that you're going to put your television on, or some sort of a television cabinet or something underneath it. Excuse me. So that's going to be where your attention is going to go in the room. This is your focal wall, for lack of a better word for it. So after you have your functional zones all laid out, and you know that you can't block your doorways and things like that, so you don't want to have furniture that's going to come out into this space over here. You want to be able to contain it to this wall over on this side here. You want to have full measurements of the space, meaning you want to have your measurements that are going to go up across the room and diagonal across the room, so that you have your full measurements of the whole space, and then you're going to want to measure each wall segment around it. I've written about this 100 times. I'll leave a link in the video description below also to give you an idea of how to really do this in the most efficient way and the easiest way. So there'll be a link to one of my pages on my site that will show you exactly how to do this step by step. But for this video, the most important measurements that you want to have are your space measurements. So you've got about 8 feet of space for your dining room area here. And then you have about 13 feet of space on this wall for your living room. And now it can come out any number of feet depending on what you're going to put here. I like to use rugs, for example. I would probably put an 8 by 10 rug in this living room space, and that's going to give me a nice definition of space for the sofa, maybe chair, cocktail table, and things like that. You have a 5-foot wall over here, which is going to be your focal wall for your television and whatnot over here, whether it's going to be a television cabinet, if you're going to mount the television to the wall, whatever you're going to do in that space is what you're going to do for that particular wall. Moving over into the entryway here, you've got about 5 feet, maybe 6 feet of space here behind the door, which means, again, you can't put anything really large there, maybe a bench, things like that. And then you got about 9 feet or so from the corner of this wall walking into this space that kind of joins this corner of the closet over here. That's going to give you a space to, have like maybe an entry rug. As I said before, maybe a small console table or something over here that you're going to use to put your keys on and things like that. So it's not going to block the access to the closet. It's not going to block anything like that. So you're kind of getting an idea then now about how much space you have to work with. So the next slide that we're going to have is talking about the type of furniture that you want to put into this space. So you don't want to have anything that has super big arms. So small spaces, I'm always preaching. You're probably sick of hearing me talking about it, but smaller scale furniture, furniture that has skinnier arms, furniture that isn't terribly deep, furniture that might, like this chair here is a good example of it, skinny arms. It's got a tight back, which means that there's no cushion on the back of it. It gives you the full inside of the seat cushion that you can go all the way back into the chair, feel very comfortable, especially if you're a taller person like me. Being able to sit back into a chair like that is going to be very comfortable. But the outside dimensions of the chair are very slim. So it doesn't have a super rolled arm on either side that's going to take up more space. So you want to be mindful of those things. You want to be mindful of getting furniture that has the most amount of interior space with the least amount of exterior space for tricky or small rooms. Same thing over here with your sofa. Now this sofa has some pretty large scale arms, but they're also not rounded. So it's not giving you an oversized arm or anything like that. And that's giving you a nice amount of space inside. Now you could go with a super skinny arm on this and have even more space inside if you wanted to. You could do maybe a 3 cushion sofa that has thinner arms. That's going to give you some nice stuff and defined space on the inside. Using things like, reflective surfaces, glass surfaces in a smaller room is going to make things feel open and airy. Scooting over here to the dining room, you can kind of see that I did a glass top dining table, and then you have armless chairs that go all the way around the table as well. That's just going to give you a nice amount of space. You're going to be able to push those chairs all the way in. Also notice the base of the table has more of a pedestal style base, even though it's more of a contemporary look to it. You can really scoot those chairs all the way in, and you don't have the legs of the chairs hitting on the legs of the table. Getting back to the size of the furniture, in this space, you don't want to have something like a large sectional. Something that's going to have a return to it is not going to fit in this space. So even if you were to push this sectional all the way down here, if you had the return flip the other way, you're going to block the entrance to the room. Even if you were to have a large sofa down here, it's going to block the access over this way. So it's not really ideal to have something big and bulky in this space like this sectional. So ideally, you want to have something that's going to just be a sofa and maybe a chair over here to keep the space as open as possible. You also want to be mindful of the scale and the shape of a television credenza on this 5-foot wall. So I put this here like this. It has some clip corners to it, which is great because clip corners or maybe something even rounded is going to be easier to navigate around than something that has a fully defined 90-degree angle on it. And that's just one of the little tricks to use for furniture in awkward spaces like this. So ideally, though, you don't want to have something that's going to take up that whole 5 feet of space. So maybe something that's 36 inches, maybe something like a small cabinet, maybe something, again, that has a rounded kind of silhouette to it is going to work a little bit better in this space than something that's going to take up this whole wall over here because you're not going to be able to walk through it. Again, with this sectional being so large, it really eats up a lot of this dining space over here. And look where we are. We're right in the kitchen. So small spaces are deceiving. You kind of really have to be able to plan things out a little bit better for them than something like this. So even, this would be a great amount of seating, and it would be wonderful for a lot of people. Like I mentioned before at the beginning of the video, this particular space is an Airbnb. So being able to have more than one or two people in there was probably going to be an ideal situation. But because of the limits of the space itself, it's kind of hard to do. So having this big sectional like this in the middle of the kitchen, blocking access to this pathway here, which goes back to the bathrooms and bedrooms, and then eating up pretty much all of the dining room space is not going to work. So keep those things in mind. We talk about alcoves too in this post. Here's another room. So this is another room that I did in Las Vegas. Now this particular house has a very interesting shape to it. You can kind of see this sort of like a step shape to the room. So we're looking at it again from above, and the front entrance is over here. There's a closet space over here. So there's doorways going back to the bathrooms and the bedrooms over here. Doorway going into the kitchen dining room over here. There's a doorway that kind of joins this space, making it kind of like a big open circle space that gets into both of these rooms here, going this direction. So you have a lot going on. There's also a fireplace that I didn't kind of map out so well in this particular picture, but it is mapped out over here. So what you want to do when you have a room that has irregular angles like this is you want to be able to follow those irregular angles. So as you can see, as I mentioned before, this room has more of a stepped kind of configuration. What I did with the layout then is I kind of mimicked those steps. So I was very mindful of those steps and knew that that was how you were really going to navigate through the room. There is no straight path going straight through this way. You have to be able to move your body kind of in that sort of angular way through the room. So why not kind of highlight that a little bit more and keep the furniture out of that natural pathway. So those Z's, or those steps that you see here, that's your pathway through the room. Okay, so that's kind of that's sort of how you're going to have to design an irregular shaped room. So I defined the space again with an 8x10 rug. I put a smaller scale sofa, 2-seat sofa over here with a chair perpendicular to it. Very classic furniture configuration. It also allows you to have that space that goes through the room. There is a very small, thin, tall etagere over here in the corner, which is open, but there's still plenty of space to get around it to get into this space over here. To create a conversation group, I angled a chair on the corner of the rug facing into the seating area over here. So you have a nice kind of conversation grouping, another classic configuration. And that kind of keeps things interesting too. A couple of sofa tables that are in a lucite or clear type of plastic that you can kind of see over here. We'll look at that in a second. And walking into the entryway over here, again, just as before, entryways, you don't want to put a lot of heavy furniture there. So I did a small bench, which is great for putting on shoes, for putting down a bag, for maybe a visitor's coming. You have a bag, you want to put it down on the bench instead of on the floor. That's a great little spot, a little hospitable spot for something like that to go. And then again, you're not blocking any of these doorways. Everything is still open and accessible. So that is how you want to handle an irregular shaped room. Now, for this particular space over here, I did a little bit of a alternative. Instead of doing an etagere, which goes, it's like a floor shelf that's more open, maybe think about doing something like narrow floating shelves on that wall. That's going to give you a little bit of an interest, some spot to do some merchandising, a spot to do a little bit of like decorating and things like that. But it's not going to take up any floor space. It's going to make the room feel a little bit more light and airy as well. You can do built-in storage too if you wanted to in that space. But then again, the idea behind all of it is you want to kind of keep things more light and airy, especially for rooms that are tricky. So for example, the space that we started off on above is one continuous space. You don't want to define those areas with wall color, for example. So you don't want to paint the dining room one color and the living room another color when they share the same wall. For smaller, trickier spaces, it's best to go with one consistent look. So if it's a color, great. Do a color on the wall. Do a blue. Do a burgundy. Do a yellow. Do a gold. Do a beige. Whatever you want to do for bringing in color. All those colors, when they're put together in a more consistent way, read as a neutral. Many different colors reads chaotic, especially in smaller spaces. You don't want to do that. So in this particular space, this is actually this room here. We're looking at it from actually from this vantage point in the corner. We're looking at the room from this direction over here, which is what this picture is right over here. So as you can see, you're looking at it into the living room. You're looking at the space. It's all white, consistent. There's a lot of color when it comes to the accent furniture, but there's not a lot of color on the wall, and I did that on purpose. So you have the same pops of color here and there, keeps things very cohesive, keeps things more calm, and that's what we wanted to do for this space. Now here's another room. So here's another idea to do an awkward shaped room, the classic L-shaped room. I've written a couple of posts about this. One of my first design dilemmas that I created for myself was in my first house, which was an L-shaped living room, dining room. And since then, I've learned lots of different things. So had I known what I know now back 15, 20 years ago, it would have been a different story. But so this is how you would handle this particular type of room. Again, your main part of your room, because it's a shared space, as we're looking at it here, this is your living room, goes right into the L-shaped dining room over here. You can kind of see that this is that shape then, and it kind of goes into the dining room over here. There's no differentiation. So even though there is a beam that goes across the wall here, you can kind of see it just a little bit right there. You're not painting the wall on the other side of it a different color. Everything is the same color. It's all consistent. You're bringing in accent colors, pops of colors, and things like that with pillows, secondary upholstery, artwork, things like that. Color, texture comes in that direction as opposed to being saturated on the wall. What I did though is I created a nice moment with a lot of contrast when it comes to the focal point of the room. So where your attention goes is where you want to put your accent colors in your room. So if you're a fan of accent walls, for example, I prefer to refer to them as focal walls, because that is where your attention is going in the room. That's where your focus is going in the room. So I created a dark colored focal wall on the fireplace wall over here. And I had the client paint her white shelves black to match that color that's going to go on the wall. That gives you a nice kind of saturated contrast color to put behind art and things like that. Lighting is going to highlight spaces in small, tricky, and awkward rooms, in any shape of a room, but especially in small, tricky, and awkward rooms. So you want to be able to have things like picture lights above your art. Recessed lighting maybe in the ceiling that's going to give you some directional light underneath it. As you can see here, I have a couple of wall sconces that are to the wall because there's not a whole lot of space to put a couple of end tables. They're quite small end tables, and big bulky lamps on smaller end tables I thought would overwhelm the space. So instead I did these two nice little kind of wall sconces that pop off, the wall pretty far. They are positionable, so you can kind of position them if you're reading a book. You can position them out further. You can direct them if you need to direct them to different things in the room. Do that. But it just gives you a little bit of versatility, more versatility than having table lamps that are bigger and bulky that would go on the tables usually. But as you can see, there's also a light over here in the corner that's going to give you a little bit of ambient light too. There's a television over here. So you have a split focal point. Secondary focal point in the room is going to be the television. Primary focal point is the fireplace, per my client's wishes. So that's why this is more of a focal point than the television is in the room. Television is secondary. So going back to that first room again, or the second room, I should say, the Z-shaped room. This is looking at it now with a more saturated color on the wall, looking at it from the entryway. But as you can see, all of the walls are the same color. I didn't define this room past this beam over here as a different color because that would be a little bit more chaotic, disjointed. It's not going to read as one continuous room. It's going to read as a separate room. It's going to read as a visual barrier. So everything is going to be the same color. So even though it is a saturated hue, blue can be a neutral color. And on the color wheel, you have orange opposite the blue on the color wheel, and that's going to give you a nice contrast. So here's some nice art that brings in sort of that color that's on the wall. There's your inspiration. The orange is opposite the color. And then all of your accessories, your lamps and things like that can be that color blue or a version of blue. Blues go well together. You can mix and match all kinds of different blues, and they typically look pretty good together. Here's another idea. So you can see that there's a bunch of pillows. This is obviously a bed. But in order to bring in some color and some life and some texture and things like that into your room, you want to vary the size of your prints on things like accent pillows. So for example, you want to do a small, medium, and a large pattern on your accent pillows. As you can see here, large pattern on this back pillow here, small pattern on the one in the center, medium size pattern on the ones that are in front of it there. This one, you have a small pattern on this pillow here, large pattern on the small pillow in the front, and then you have the medium patterns on the pillows that are flanking the back and the front of the group here. Just gives you a nice pattern and texture, gives you the ability to bring in different shapes and different subjects. So you can see there's a floral, then we have a geometric, then you have a little bit more geometric, then you have almost like a pinstripe geometric over on this pillow, a nice big kind of print that looks maybe like a seashell or some sort of flower that's on that pillow there. You can vary in those textures, vary in those patterns, and it just creates a more dynamic looking arrangement for pillows and accents and things like that in the room. So that's a good way to bring a lot of color and texture into the room, especially if your walls are neutral, beige, white. Even if they're a color, you want to kind of contrast that with a little bit of texture and pattern in your pillows. Now, bringing in things like DIY cabinets and things like that into a space. So another idea that you can do for irregular walls to kind of capitalize on the height of the wall, for example, is to maybe build your own built-in into this space. So if you can't find furniture that's going to fit ideally into a small alcove or into a tricky corner in a room, think about building custom shelves. Think about hiring a contractor to build in custom shelving, maybe some cabinetry with some open shelving above it, that's going to be able to utilize that space, that tricky space, that awkward corner, a little bit more than trying to find something to retrofit in there that's already existing on the market that might not fit just as well. It's sort of, again, going back to that puzzle piece where you're trying to push that puzzle piece in and it's not quite fitting. Having something more custom might be the way to go for a tricky, small, or awkward space. So here's an example of that. Here's a nice little corner. Can't really see the whole room, but the idea behind this is that you're using the verticality of the space. You're using the whole length of the wall, and then you're doing this nice built-in cabinet that goes, use your imagination, all the way up to the ceiling or maybe just below it. But it gives you all of this vertical space to do all of this nice merchandising, have some nice storage in it. But if you were trying to find something like a china cabinet or a credenza that might be too big or too small, or there might be a doorway just past this space over here, or a doorway just past this space over here, and you're kind of like limited with how much width you have in that particular wall, think about going up and hiring somebody to build you cabinets or DIY it yourself if you're handy to do that. So that would be a great way to bring in a little bit more of verticality into the space. So to sum up, designing for an oddly shaped room can be both a challenge and an opportunity to showcase your creativity. And by carefully assessing your space, measuring it all out, making sure you know how much space you have, designating your functional areas in your pathways, you can really approach this from a very smart perspective and use up that space the best way that it can be used, because that's the name of the game. You don't want to leave odd little spaces unattended to. So tell me about what you would do. If you have different spaces, please leave me a comment below, or read the blog and leave a comment in the blog. Let me know what you've come up with for a couple of tricky spaces in your house, and that would be great. And as I mentioned at the top of the video, I want to give you a quick little update. I'm going to insert some video clips here at the end to kind of talk to you a little bit about what's going on in my pantry cabinet. As I said before, a couple weeks ago, we did the storage on the back of the pantry door, and now we're moving into the space. So what I did was I found this fantastic opportunity for previously loved used cabinets on Facebook Marketplace. They were in great condition. They are not the color that I want them to be. They're going to be painted a color that's going to work with my pantry. Probably a color that is going to work with my kitchen, which my kitchen is black and white. So I think that maybe the base cabinets will be black and possibly the above cabinets are going to be white. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we got going on for these cabinets. They were in a family room in a town not too far from where I live here in Buffalo. And they are a sort of desk, cabinet, sort of built-in area that the homeowner took out, and they're going to do something else with the space. And when they put them on Facebook Marketplace, I found them and I thought this would be great because this is a nice base cabinet. So when I got them home, I put the base cabinet into the space and found that it was actually quite short. So it was quite a lot shorter than my base cabinets in my kitchen. And if I had a worktop on top of it, like a countertop or something, it's going to be a little bit wonky. So it's not going to be very useful for me. But there was this drawer that was a sort of like a keyboard style drawer, maybe for pencils and things like that, that was longer, that was alongside of the cabinet from the previous owner's house. So it was sort of like a smaller piece of furniture, so like a desk type height piece of furniture that they had built into this corner. And so what I decided to do was I wanted to take that long drawer, which wouldn't have fit into my space anyway, and I modified it into a small drawer and put it on top of the existing cabinet. So now I have 4 drawers instead of 3 drawers, and it's now the height of my cabinets, my base cabinets in the kitchen. So that's going to give me a little bit more space, more functional space. And going back to the whole DIY idea behind this video at the end here was don't be afraid to modify things. So I found this cabinet, group of cabinets for $60, and it's not a whole lot of money. So I decided I'm going to modify them and see what I can do to come up with for a new kind of approach for this room. And so what I'm going to do on the top is I have a top cabinet that is the same exact collection that I got from the previous homeowner. And it is a long cabinet, I think it's about 40 inches long, so it's quite long. It's going to go up on the wall in the corner of my cabinets, the corner of my pantry, to make a wall cabinet, and then I'm going to have open shelving above it. Now, if you looked back in the previous video, you're going to see that my idea was I was going to have countertop with the refrigerator on the top, and the whole bottom was going to be cabinet storage. I couldn't find cabinets that were going to go across the whole bottom. So what I decided to do was I'm going to put my little mini refrigerator underneath the cabinet next to the base cabinet that I built and modified. And then there's going to be a small space on the side, which, as you can see here in this video, are this very wonky cabinet that I made, which is great because it's just open storage, and it's going to be space for things like wrapping paper and organized things like my envelopes for shipping out books. I have a Pango book account too, which I'll link below. I sell used books on Pango account as well. Things that I've read, I have so many books, too many books actually, and I need to get rid of them. So that's the whole idea behind the Pango book account. So I also find that wrapping the books is a little bit tricky in my space because I usually don't have a lot of space to wrap them up. So I wrap them up in my kitchen. And now this is going to be a dedicated space in this little pantry where I'm going to have all of my envelopes and packing supplies and things like that for my books, so that I can just wrap them up and ship them out, and it'll be great. So that's the whole function behind that. I was originally going to put cans or something else in there. Maybe I was going to put baking sheets, but then I thought this is in my pantry, which is around the corner from where my stove is. And it's not going to be a great idea to have my cooking sheets and things like that in there because it's not functional. So this is more functional. This is more purposeful for me, and I'm very excited about that. So above that is going to be open shelves next to the cabinet on the wall. And then I'm going to do some sort of a wall treatment, either wallpaper or that tile that I talked about. There's going to be some sort of thing going on in there that's going to make the space good. So that's what I'm working on this coming week. Getting the cabinet up on the wall, figuring out what kind of countertop I'm going to need. If I'm going to have to buy a countertop, maybe I can find that secondhand, but it would be great. I do have some remnants of cabinet countertops from when I did my kitchen over in my garage that I can redo, that I can either paint or put some contact paper on to make it look similar to my countertops in the kitchen. So there's a couple of things in play that I want to do, but it's all coming around. I'm not spending a ton of money, as I mentioned before in the last video. This is a challenge to me to use things that I already have. So far, I've spent $60, and I've used everything else has been in my house that I've already had here. So I'm very proud of that so far. So far so good. And if you tune in next week, that's going to be more of an update for that. If I'm not ready with the video next week, which who knows, you'll get another update on what things are going on with the pantry, and you'll see exactly what's going on with all that stuff. But thank you so much again for joining me this week, and I will talk to you again next week. Take care. Bye-bye.